Good evening. As Jeremy said, my name is Daniel, and it is a privilege to be here speaking with you guys this evening. And speaking on a topic that, as Jeremy mentioned, I think is really important and timely for the culture that we currently live in. So my task tonight is to try to speak to you on the topic of whether self-improvement can really fix us. Can self-improvement fix us? And I have a lot of ground to cover. In fact, I think probably harder for me in this talk was what should I not say rather than what should I say, because there's so much that can be said. So it probably goes without saying that there'll probably be some angles that I don't cover. This talk will not be exhaustive in that sense, but it's also good that we've got the Q&A after. So if there's anything that comes into your mind that you think, oh, I'd like to double click on that, or, oh, you didn't think about this facet, then we've got the Q&A. Just note down the question and we'll be happy to take it after. Okay. So I think before I really get into this topic of trying to understand whether self-improvement can fix us, I have to start by trying to define what I mean by self-improvement. And what I've done is gone for a pretty broad description of the phenomenon. So I've written down self-improvement. By referring to self-improvement, I'm referring to the ways in which we consciously expend effort with the aim of becoming better versions of ourselves. Consciously expending effort with the aim of becoming better versions of ourselves. And this includes a wide spectrum of things we might do to improve ourselves physically, mentally, emotionally, to be more resilient, more productive, all of those kinds of things. And I think in our current day, self-improvement has really morphed into a bit of an amorphous and very large space. So this can include things from tips and hacks on how you can improve your diet, your sleep, your exercise, your time management, money management. But it can also include a wide variety of more exotic things, like sort of daily affirmations and mantras, things like the law of attraction, forest bathing, sound cleansing. The list goes on. It feels like every day there's a new way that you can improve yourself. So we're talking about a quite broad topic. But what is clear is that self-improvement is everywhere, and it is big business. I think I looked at a market assessment that estimated that the global self-improvement industry is worth about 40 billion US dollars. And that's projected to more than double within the next decade. It is big business. And you can probably see that by just taking a cursory glance of YouTube or other platforms. You can see that some of the biggest podcasts, some of the biggest influencers are people who ply their trade in trying to help you become a better version of yourself. It is big business. And I think all of us are exposed to self-improvement messages implicitly or explicitly every single day. It's even in the way things are advertised to us. You can think of something as mundane as a notebook, and the advert goes something like, buy this innovative notebook and it will deal with your anxiety and 10x your productivity. And the basic message is, if you buy this product, it will make you a better version of yourself. It will improve you. And so I think, therefore, it's critical that we're able to think clearly on this topic of self-improvement. And that's what I want to do tonight. So before I get into it, I think it'll be quite interesting to get a sense of how you guys feel about this idea of self-improvement. So I'm going to poll the room. Let's do a show of hands. How many of you here would say that you're generally quite optimistic about self-improvement and its benefits? Show of hands. Okay, that's a good number of people in the room, pretty optimistic. How many of you would say that you're relatively ambivalent? You're sort of neither here nor there about self-improvement? Okay, small number. How many of you would say you're more sort of pessimistic about it? You think it's generally actually quite harmful? A very small number, but a few people. Okay, well, I'm sure that behind the different opinions and perspectives in the room would be a wide range of personal experiences. So I'm sure that for some of you, maybe you've applied some self-improvement advice to great benefit. And you can look back on your life, or maybe even look at old pictures and think, oh my goodness, I'm a much happier, healthier, more fulfilled version of myself than that person I was back then. You might look back and say, thank goodness that I took this thing in stride. It has transformed my life. And you're grateful. And you think more people should take this on. This stuff really helps. But for some of you, Maybe you're here and you feel a bit more jaded about the idea of self-improvement. Maybe you applied yourself diligently to some advice that overpromised and underdelivered. Maybe you even lost money on books and seminars and courses that really in the end provided little benefit, little change in your life. Maybe you tried really hard, but in the end, nothing really changed. And so you look at it and you think, well, this self-improvement stuff it's a bunch of junk. It's just a money-making scheme. I think we have a wide variety of experiences. But what about me? I want to lay my own cards on the table as we get into this. If you asked me personally how I feel, I actually think self-improvement can be quite helpful. I don't have any kind of an agenda against self-improvement. I think actually, whose life wouldn't be better if they ate healthier and slept on time and drank more water? It can be helpful. The question that I'm trying to ask tonight is not, can self-improvement have a positive impact on your life? If that was the question, then there wouldn't be much of a talk. It's just, well, yes, of course it can have a good impact on your life. That's not the question. The question I want to answer and explore is, can self-improvement fix us? You see, I think self-improvement can be a good thing, but it has its limits. And I think it is a helpful tool, but a really poor solution to your deepest problems. And that's what I want to explore. So I want to do this by asking and attempting to answer a few questions. And the first question is a bit further upstream, which is, why self-improvement in the first place? What is it that we turn to self-improvement to fix? What problem is it trying to solve? That's my first question. Now, I think there are many problems. I think it's hard to say this is just one thing that makes people turn to self-improvement. Lots of people have lots of different reasons why they get into it, lots of different triggers. And I think it often stems from recognizing some area of brokenness in our lives, some disordered patterns of thinking, of behaving, of feeling that make you sort of sit up and say, I need to fix up. This isn't okay. Maybe you wake up hungover yet again, and you think to yourself, enough is enough. Or maybe you get a bad performance review at work, and you get home and you're thinking, I need to do better. Or perhaps you find yourself anxious and struggling to sleep, and you're thinking to yourself, I need to stop caring so much what people think about me. And then you go on YouTube and pull up some videos, you turn on a podcast, you order a book, and you look and think, who can tell me how I can fix myself? You turn to self-improvement. But then I don't think it's only seeing brokenness in ourselves that makes us turn to self-improvement. Actually, I think you could feel generally fine about yourself, but then turn to self-improvement because when you look around, you feel like, I don't measure up. I don't measure up. You look around and you think, I'm doing okay, but I could be doing much better. And because of that, again, we turn to self-improvement from comparison. It's often a big driver for us. And I think there are particular things about our modern culture, our current day, that only exacerbate this hunger and this drive for us to improve ourselves. I'll give you a couple of those. I think one of the things that has caused self-improvement to explode in popularity in recent decades is the sort of self-esteem movement of the 1970s and 1980s. It was this idea that was very popular at the time, which was, if we can get young people to have a really high view of themselves, to have high self-esteem, then that will help them to live happier, healthier lives and make better choices because they've got self-esteem. So because of that, we raised generations of people, probably most of us in this room, were raised being told, you're special. You've got so much potential. You can do anything if you put your mind to it. You can be anything. And we got raised with this sense of boundless optimism at what the prospects of our lives could be. But the problem with that is that it then creates a sense of expectation in us and a sort of internalized pressure for you to perform. And anything that felt less than exceptional felt like failure. So you find yourself here, and look at me, I'm here, I'm speaking to you, but I could be an astronaut. I could be on the International Space Station right now, but I'm here with you people, sweating after arriving far later than I was meant to be. I mean, I probably need to improve my timekeeping. I've chucked that one up to self-improvement. But there is this sense that we have so much potential, and every day it feels like we're squandering it. There's this pressure to perform. And because of that, we're constantly drawn to self-improvement, even if other people look at our lives and think, I would love to have your life. Your life looks great, but you still want to improve it. But it's not just that. I think you have this toxic combination of this internalized desire to perform and then this platform of social media that allows you to benchmark and compare your performance to other people all of the time. So even if you feel like you're doing okay, you can just open your device and realize you're not doing that great. There's people who are doing much better. Imagine for a second your great-grandparents, maybe, or let's say great-great-grandparents. Maybe they were farmers. And just like you, they would have probably felt a sense of not measuring up in different circumstances. Maybe they looked at the farm the next door over and thought, wow, those guys have 2 horses. We've only got 1. It would be great if we could have an extra horse. Or wow, those guys have 15 kids. We only have 10. It would be great if we could have 5 more kids. But what that sense of envy would not have done is it would probably not have triggered this sort of existential crisis where they then determined that every morning I'm going to get up at 5 a.m. I'm going to do 100 push-ups. I'm going to give myself some daily affirmations. I'm going to do everything that I can to manifest the life of my wildest dreams. That probably would not have been the response. But then you fast forward to present day, and you can be sat here, content with your life, and then you open up your Instagram or some other social media, and you see this person who's on there, and this person has built a multi-million-pound business. They've got a six-pack. They're happily married, and they've got a cute dog, and they haven't even turned 25. And you look at yourself, and you're thinking, I'm a failure. What am I doing with my life? And then you turn to self-improvement. So comparison gets us all jacked up with this. And I think it's very easy for us to feel like comparative failures. I think we feel this all the time. I mean, you might, do a couch to 5K program, and the day that you finally run your first 5K, you go online and you realize, oh, my colleague just did an ultramarathon. Or you have worked really hard to get promoted, and you've made your promotion to manager, and as soon as you're about to post it on LinkedIn, you realize that really annoying classmate, really, really annoying person just got promoted to managing director. Wow, what a failure. And when we see these things, there's this relentless sense that I need to get better. I need to keep improving myself. And while I think our modern world does do many things to contribute to this hunger and this drive that we have for self-improvement, I don't think the underlying desire that fuels it is anything modern or new. In fact, I think this is something that is as old as humanity itself. I think it is fueled ultimately by the desire in all of us to feel like we are enough. We want to feel enough. And I think self-improvement is our way of dealing with that nagging sense that we're not enough. We're not strong enough. We're not smart enough. We're not athletic enough. We're not attractive enough. We're not disciplined enough. Whatever it is, we feel like we're not enough. And so we turn to self-improvement to make us better so that we can become a more perfect, more enough version of ourselves. And the question is, can it do that? I think the answer is no. I don't think it can do that. But before I go into why, I think there's probably one other subconscious, but quite morbid thing that propels us towards self-improvement. And I think that's the reality that all of us know, that sooner or later, maybe tomorrow, maybe 80 years from now, we're going to die. We know that we're going to die. And we think to ourselves, when it's all over, will it have been worth it? Will I have made my life count? Will I have fulfilled my potential? What legacy will I leave behind? Because the fact is, there is no one who wants their loved ones at their funeral scratching their heads trying to think of something noteworthy that they did to put in a eulogy. We think to ourselves, life is too short to be mediocre. I need to improve myself. And so we turn to self-improvement. We want to fix up. So, in summary, I've said, I think self-improvement is essentially something we turn to help us deal with this sense that we're not enough. But I don't think it can actually do that for us. That leads us to my second question, which is, why can't self-improvement make you feel enough? It's a pretty straightforward question. Why can't it make you feel enough? The first reason I want to give you is rooted in the very nature of self-improvement and what it is. You see, self-improvement, by definition, is all about the journey and not the destination. It tells you how you can get better, but it doesn't tell you when you're good enough. It gives you tips, tricks. These are ways you can move forward. And the thing is, if your solution to feeling enough is trying to improve yourself, then friend, you're on a treadmill. You're going to always be moving, but never getting anywhere, because the fact is, you can always be better. It doesn't give you a destination. That's the first reason. But a second reason is the fact that even if you do see a good level of improvement in areas that you've worked really hard to, improve and to work on, it doesn't necessarily make you feel enough, because no self-improvement solution is holistic enough. This is what I like to call the whack-a-mole effect. Does anyone know that game, whack-a-mole, where you just hit this thing, another one pops out, you hit it, another one pops out? And I think that gives you a bit of a sort of analogy for what self-improvement often looks like. It's the effect that tells you that often when you focus effort trying to improve one area of your life, you find that it can often negatively impact another area of your life. So think, for example, let's say you decided you really wanted to get in shape. So now you're going to hit the gym every single day. But then after some time, you realize, actually, all of this going to bed early and getting up at 6 a.m. so that I can go to the gym is taking a toll on my friendships. I don't get to spend time with my friends like I used to. And now you're feeling a bit of a relational deficit. You feel like you never see your friends. So you decide to rejig your schedule. Now you're prioritizing time with people you love, spending time with your friends. But then after some time passes, you realize, actually, all this time in the pub just catching up with my friends is stopping me from being able to do all of those online courses that could really help me to get forward in my career. And actually, now I feel like I'm lagging and I'm falling behind professionally. So then you pivot again. I'm going to focus on trying to improve my career. And then over time, you realize that every time you fix one thing, another thing breaks. And you're constantly in this spiral of just feeling like, I'm never doing enough. I might be okay in this area, but then I'm not okay in this area, and I'm just frantically turning from thing to thing, from thing to thing. You're playing whack-a-mole. So that's another issue. But I'll give you a third reason why self-improvement will not solve your problem of not enoughness. And this one, I think, is the most insidious and harmful flaw of trusting in self-improvement. And that is the fact that it forces you to be the hero of your own story. You have to be the hero. The thing is, trusting in self-improvement is based on a pretty pessimistic assumption of the world. And I think this assumption was summarized quite well by David Goggins in his book, Can't Hurt Me, even though he was speaking of this in a positive light. And he said, no one is going to come help you. No one is coming to save you. And this is the fundamental premise behind trusting in self-improvement. It is this sense that no one's going to save me. I have to be the hero. I have to save myself. And you see, this sounds good at first. It sounds like, okay, I'm up for a challenge. Let's do this. But friend, it is a precarious way to live. It is a very precarious way to live, because no matter how much self-belief you have, no matter how many motivational videos you watch, no matter how much time you spend psyching yourself up in the mirror, none of that changes the fact that you're still imperfect. You're still limited, and you will fail. And this is a problem. Because what then happens when your hero's best is not good enough? What happens when the savior that you're trusting in doesn't even want to get out of bed in the morning? What happens when you've fixed this 10-year plan for how you're going to elevate your life and live out your wildest dreams, and then life all of a sudden takes a very sharp turn left and rips that plan to shreds? All of a sudden you have an unexpected diagnosis, or maybe a betrayal from someone who is so intricately linked to that plan. Or maybe you just fall into a deep depression and that plan is ripped to shreds. What do you do then? Who do you turn to when your hero fails you? Because the reality is, when you trust in self-improvement, you are trusting in a hero who is guaranteed to fail. That's just the reality of being human. You will fail. And what do you do then? You see, self-improvement presents itself as a path to freedom, but in the end, it ends up being a pretty crushing weight. It's a crushing weight, friend. And the thing about it as well is this idea that I'm going to save myself in itself seems like something that is almost anti-religious. People often think of self-improvement as sort of a flip side or an alternative to religion, where you're telling yourself, I don't need some God to come and save me and to tell me how to live and to boss me around. I'm going to be my own boss. I'm going to be the hero. I will save myself. And it sounds like it's not religious, but friend, self-improvement is basically like the vast majority of religions in the world. You essentially have, this list of rules you're going to follow, this list of principles you're going to keep, and then those things will help you to live a good life. The only difference between self-improvement and any other religion is the fact that you get to choose the rules that you want to measure up to. But it's fundamentally the same premise. And it ends up having the same pitfalls that every religion does. What you end up with is people who trust in self-improvement end up looking like the worst kinds of religious people. Because what happens? When things are going well, when you're keeping the rules that you've set yourself, you're doing well, you're meeting your targets, then you feel smug and self-righteous. Maybe you're keeping up with your diet and you're looking around at people and thinking, oh, man, don't they know that stuff is so terrible for them? Why are they eating that? Or perhaps you are managing your time really well and you're doing your deep work and you're blocking out your calendar. And you look at people and think to yourself, oh my goodness, they spend so much time on social media. How many hours are they losing and frittering away? And maybe you try to hide this self-righteousness, but eventually it spills out. And people eventually start to feel, you're unbearable these days. Your constant comments and constant advice and your facial expressions and remarks, you just, ugh. And that's what happens when things are good. But then the converse is also true, because you also get that same religious reaction when you fail, when you're not keeping up to the standards that you set yourself. And then that self-righteousness turns to self-loathing. And you go and you look at yourself in the mirror and you think, what a failure. What a loser. And so you decide you're going to punish yourself. You're going to do some kind of penance, whether that's longer fasts, stricter diets, more intense workouts, longer hours at work, canceling plans with friends. You figure out some way to make yourself pay for failing yourself. You're filled with self-loathing. And you end up in this cycle, looking very religious. You see, trusting in self-improvement, friends, is not ever going to make you feel enough. It's a deeply insecure and unstable way to live, because ultimately it roots your worth in your performance. And that is not a good place to be when you're going to fail. When that's the case, you'll never be enough. So, I've said self-improvement can't fix us. It can't make us feel enough. But all of this has been predicated on an implicit assumption. which is the assumption that we're not enough and we need to be fixed. And this isn't an assumption that people universally agree with these days. In fact, many people would very vehemently deny this. There's so many people who would say, actually, yes, I do think self-improvement is a hoax. Rather than focusing on trying to improve yourself, what you need to do is to accept yourself. It's not about optimizing your life, figuring out all your flaws, trying to fix those things. Actually, what you should do is learn to love yourself. You need to love yourself before you can even think about improving yourself. So people preach a message of self-acceptance. And the question is, does it work? Will it make you feel enough? That brings me to my third question. Is self-acceptance then a better alternative to self-improvement? I want to start, before I answer that question, by telling you a story about a woman called Marion Power. Has anyone heard of Marion Power? No. Okay, cool. She's not very popular. At least not as far as I know. That's not some kind of slight on her. I'm sure she's great. But Marion Power wrote a book called Help Me, where she details this self-help journey that she went on. And she also gave a TED Talk, which is called, let me get it right, Why Self-Help Will Not Change Your Life. And a brief summary of Marion's story is essentially she was in a place where she felt stuck in a rut. She was 36 years old. She was single. She was in a lot of debt. She was a freelance journalist who felt just a bit stagnant in her career. She was drinking a bit too much. And she looked around her and all her friends were moving on in life. They were buying houses, having kids. And she thought to herself, I need to fix up. I'm going to improve myself. And so she set herself a challenge. She said, for the next year, every single month, I'm going to read a self-help book, and I'm going to try my best to implement every single thing that it says for 12 months. And so she started. She got into it, and she read, there's a pretty broad spectrum of stuff in there. She started off the first month with sort of going skydiving, doing some public speaking, doing stand-up comedy because she had read this book called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. So she decided, I'm going to face my fears. And then she went from that and then read The Secret. And then went around trying to apply the law of attraction to manifest £100,000 into her bank account. Spoiler alert, it didn't work. She was still broke. And then she continued. She tried this thing called rejection therapy, which is some kind of thing that tells you that if you just try to get rejected at least once every day, then you will desensitize yourself to rejection and you go after the things that you really want. And maybe sometimes people will actually say yes and you'll be surprised. So she tried that, had some pretty painful experiences, but she kept going. And then she even did a sort of Tony Robbins Unleash the Power Within seminar, where you and some other participants, you guys run across a bed of hot coals to unleash the power within. And she did that. And in the talk, she then reflects on what her mental state was after 10 months of just trying to apply all of these self-improvement principles. And this is what she says. She says, I found the more I tried to improve myself, the more I was aware of my flaws. The more I chased happiness, the less happy I became. And the more I thought about myself, the more I hated myself. You see, she was spiraling and really not in a good place. And her loved one started expressing concern, saying, actually, I think this thing is going a bit far. And so she decided to start seeing a therapist. And then she read another 2 books, which completely changed her perspective. And at the end of that year, what she had decided and come to the conclusion of was that just simply trying harder and harder and harder to improve herself was not going to make her feel enough. That's what she realized. And I think that's true. I've basically said that in my previous section. But then she goes on to give some takeaways, what she learned and what she would like us to learn from this experience. And this is what she said. She said, please remember, you're okay the way you are. If you get up every morning and try your best to be a decent person, that's really enough. And then she continues later. She says, all I could see was this endless list of everything that was wrong with me. I thought I was broken and needed to fix myself. And now I see that I was never broken, and I didn't need to fix myself, and neither do you. That was her conclusion. And I think this advice probably reflects what an increasing number of people believe today. Many people believe that actually you're not going to get very far telling yourself you're broken and there's all these things that you need to fix. Actually, you need to look in the mirror and simply accept who you are, warts and all. Accept yourself. My question, like I said before, is, will this make you feel enough? And I want to contend that it absolutely will not. It won't. Why is that? You see, I think people often put self-acceptance as the sort of healthy alternative to self-improvement. But actually, I think they're not that different when you think about it. They are based on the same premise that David Goggins articulated, which is the premise that no one is going to help you. No one is coming to save you. Both of them say the same thing. You have to save yourself. You need to be your hero. Whereas self-improvement tells you that you need to save yourself by working hard to improve yourself and make yourself better, self-acceptance tells you you need to save yourself by working hard to love yourself and to accept yourself for who you really are. And the problem is, in the end, it's the same message. Broken person, fix yourself. Save yourself. And I don't think that message works. You see, when you go from trusting in your ability to improve yourself to trusting in your ability to love yourself, you might think you've taken the easier path, but friend, I think you've jumped from the frying pan into the fire. Because the fact is, it is a lot easier to wake up each day at 6 a.m., do your exercise, stay hydrated, eat your vegetables, than it is to wake up every day and to consistently feel feelings of love and acceptance of yourself. It is a lot easier to control what you will do than how you will feel. The person who decides, I'm going to trust in my ability to love myself, has laid on themselves an even bigger weight and burden than the person who just wants to improve themselves. That's something you can measure. That's something you can track. This is harder. You see, some days you're going to feel amazing. You're going to look in the mirror and you're going to be like, you're a rock star. You're so cool. I love you. And some other days, you're going to look at yourself and you're going to remember how last night you had one too many drinks again, or you snoozed your alarm again, or you skipped that workout again, or you ate that chocolate bar again. And then you're going to look at yourself and try to summon all of those feelings of self-love, but the only thing that you can come up with is, what a loser. You failed. And friend, this is a problem. You can't trust yourself to love yourself. Paradoxically, you can end up starting to hate yourself for not loving yourself enough. It's a pretty twisted thing, but you can end up there. But I think there's another reason why self-acceptance ends up not able to make you feel enough. And for that, I want to go back to the story of Marion Powers. So Marion gave that TED talk. And at the start of the talk, she said that at the beginning of her self-help journey, she felt like she was drinking far too much. She was stagnant in her career. She was spending really poorly and had really bad debt. All of these different things were broken. But then at the end of the talk, she said that she realized that there was never anything broken about her. And she didn't need to fix herself. There was nothing to fix. She was perfect. And I think this points to another issue with self-acceptance, which is it often forces us to maintain a level of self-delusion that is hard to sustain. It sounds harsh, but it's true. It forces us to delude ourselves. Because what she had to do was to look at her life and see some things that fundamentally felt very much broken and convince herself, it's okay. I'm okay. You see, think about your life with all of the mess and the things you don't like a messy room. It's got just lots of different stuff in places they shouldn't be. It's a messy room. You can think about self-improvement like someone frantically going around that room, just trying to arrange everything, trying to align everything. But every time that they set something right, they accidentally knock over another thing, and they go and they try and arrange that, and they're just frantic, moving round and round in circles, and the room never gets clean. But then you can think about self-acceptance like the person who looks around, sees the really messy room, and decides, you know what? I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to turn off the light. And I'm going to tell myself, this room is not messy. This room is clean. And you see, the problem with that is it only takes an amount of time for that person to realize that the delusion can't hold. Eventually, they're going to trip over some shoes that are just strewn in the wrong place. Or they're going to step in some dirty laundry. And they're going to realize, actually, no, this room is still messy. It's not clean. Now, you might say, because I've given this analogy, and I'm basically saying that self-acceptance forces you to ignore or minimize things that are actually broken about yourself and to just accept them. But you might say, Daniel, it was a little bit funny, but that was a weak analogy. Why? Because when I choose to accept myself, I don't ignore the things that are broken. I don't ignore all of my weaknesses and my failures. What I do is I acknowledge my failures and I accept myself the way that I am. And I'd say, okay, you got me somewhat, but you still have a problem, which is when you accept yourself, warts and all of your failures, then what do you do with your guilt? What do you do with your guilt? Because the reality is, not all of our failures are neutral. They carry weight. There are things that we rightly should feel ashamed of, things that we are objectively guilty of. And when you choose to simply accept yourself, what do you do with that? Where does that guilt go? You see, simply telling yourself that nobody's perfect will not suffice. It's hollow. Simply trying to shift the blame to someone else or to some circumstance or to some situation, some extenuating factor, also won't suffice. You know that at some point you have to take ownership, at least of part of it. But then we have the golden 21st century answer, which is you can forgive yourself. And my friend, I want to say in categorical terms, that is nonsense. We know that the idea of forgiving yourself is ridiculous. We know it intuitively. Everybody knows intuitively that guilty people don't get to pardon themselves. That's why we don't tell a convicted criminal, you can choose when you want to leave prison. You can determine your sentence. Just choose how long you want to be in there. We don't tell them that. It's why people felt a sense of deep outrage just at not the actual act, but just the idea that potentially Donald Trump could issue himself a presidential pardon for all of the open court cases against him when he got elected as president. People thought, that's ridiculous. How can he become the president and just pardon himself? But we say that to ourselves all the time. I need to forgive myself and move on. It's nonsense. We know that of a truth, forgiveness is something that has to be given to us. We don't just get to dispense it ourselves. So, again, or rather, ultimately, self-acceptance, just like self-improvement, is an exercise in futility. What you end up with is having to delude yourself and suppress guilt, but it doesn't make you feel enough. So, at this point, this talk is getting pretty depressing. I've said self-improvement doesn't work, self-acceptance doesn't work. So what works? What can we do? This brings me to my final question, which is, what can make us feel enough? What can make us feel enough? Now, I think this feeling of not being enough actually points to a much deeper and basic human desire, something that's fundamentally wired into us, and that is the need for validation or for affirmation. And you can think about this by just maybe, you probably can't cast your mind back, but imagining yourself as a baby. Maybe you were just playing around in the room, and all of a sudden, you realize you've unlocked a new trick. You manage to front crawl or like front roll. Or you manage to sort of get yourself up onto the couch and shuffle along the couch. In those moments, I mean, of course, you can't really get into the mind of a child, but in those moments, you probably weren't telling yourself, nice one, smashed it, good job. But instead, what you were doing was immediately you did that, you looked up. You looked up and you said, Mommy, did you see what I did? Daddy, did you see what I did? You looked up to see, did my parents see me? And what you're desiring in that moment is validation. It's a sense of affirmation. What you're desiring in that moment is for your parent to look at you and to say, well done. Good job. Good boy. Good girl. We desire that deeply. Affirmation is like oxygen for our lungs. It's why a kid could have done a trick a mile away from the house and they run all the way back just to say, Daddy, you wouldn't believe it. Did a backflip in a bouncy castle. And you're like, great, well done. But we desire this. It's in our hearts. And the fact is, as we grow older, this desire can become more subtle and more sophisticated, but it never goes away. We still deeply want to hear, well done. Good job. You're so kind. You're such a good friend. You're really good at your job. You are so smart. We need validation. It's not something we can get rid of. And so, this desire for affirmation, when it's not met, then pushes us towards self-improvement. We think, I want to hear well done, so I need to improve myself so I can receive that affirmation. I can get told well done. And so we work hard, and we work hard, and we work hard. But the problem is, all of us realize as we grow older that people's affirmation of us is often fickle. It's hard to depend on it. You see, sometimes you do something really good, something really noteworthy, and guess what? Nobody noticed. Or sometimes you do something and people acknowledge it, but it's like they don't really see it as a big deal because they don't know how hard you worked for that thing. They don't know how much it cost you to do that thing. And they give you little affirmation. Or maybe even worse, you might be surrounded by people from whom all you receive is unrelenting criticism. All you hear is all of the different ways you don't measure up, all of the different ways you failed, but no one ever tells you, good job, when you've done something good. No one ever notices when you've done something good. And so over time, we build this defense mechanism where we start to think to ourselves, you know what? Who cares what people think? I am my own boss. I will affirm myself. I will tell myself good job. I will buy myself the cake. I'll take myself on the holiday. I'll congratulate myself. I will celebrate me. What I need is my approval. So we turn to self-acceptance. Like I said, neither of those things really proves worthwhile in the end. Can't depend on them. And this desire for validation, unfortunately, just won't leave us. You can try to train yourself to not desire any validation from anywhere, but it's like trying to train yourself to not breathe. It's futile. And I don't think the desire for validation in itself is a bad thing, although it can lead us to do things that are often desperate and cringy and embarrassing. But the desire itself, I don't think is a bad thing. In fact, I think it is a good thing. And it was put in us by the God who made us. I think that desire is there for a reason. I think we were created with that desire. And ultimately, I think that desire cannot be fulfilled and satisfied by the validation of other people. It can't be satisfied by the validation of yourself. It can't be satisfied by some composite of your validation and other people's validation. No, none of those can satisfy. No amount of self-improvement or self-acceptance will ever satisfy the hearts of a person who does not know the affirmation of the God who made them. Because the reality is that God made us with a desire, an innate, inbuilt desire to know his validation, to know his affirmation. The only affirmation that will quiet a restless soul is to hear from the God who made you well done, my child, well done. And the fact is, all of our efforts to make things work, to become better versions of ourselves, they prove futile in the end. They can't scratch that itch. But herein lies the problem. This is the rub. We desperately, desperately need and desire that validation, but none of us deserves it. Not a single one. There is no one here who deserves to hear well done from God. Because think about it, God is perfect. He's beautiful. He's pure. And me, you, none of us are. None of us come even close. All of us fall short of his perfect standard. I mean, we don't even meet our own imperfect standards. We lower the bar and we fall below. We lower the bar, we fall below again. We can't meet our own standards, not to talk of God's. All of us have ignored him, rejected him, betrayed him. We've disobeyed him. The Bible summarizes this quite succinctly when it says, "For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God." And because of that, we find ourselves in a really uncomfortable position where we desperately desire this sense of validation, this sense of enoughness, but we can't get there. We can't get it. We don't deserve it. So how can we fix this? How do we fix it? And this is where the good news of Christianity, what we call the gospel, comes in. And it tells you simply, you can't fix it. You just can't. But God has chosen to fix it himself. He's chosen to fix it. You see, your brokenness and your sin, your imperfections, they have created a breach. And they separate you from God in this life. It's why you can never feel any tangible sense of his well done. It's why you never feel enough. And they're also destined to separate you from him for eternity. That's the verdict and the state that we find ourselves in. But what the gospel says is that God made a way to fix that problem. It tells us that he sent his son, Jesus Christ. And you see, Jesus is altogether different. Jesus is the one person in all of human history who actually deserved to hear God's well done. He was perfect. He had nothing that he needed to improve about himself. He had nothing he needed to accept about himself. He was entirely and completely perfect. He, unlike any of us, knew God's validation perfectly. He could always hear the Father's, "Well done, my child." He didn't struggle with being not enough. But this same Jesus chose to go and to lay down his life, to sacrifice himself so that he could pay the penalty for your guilt, to pay the penalty for your imperfections, to deal with your failures, so that when you put your trust in him, God can look at you and he can say, "Well done, my child." When you trust in him, God can look at you and he can accept you. Not because you've become perfect, not because you are good enough, but because Jesus Christ, who went in your place and took your punishment, is good enough. When you put your trust in him, God is able to accept you because of him. He's able to treat you as he deserved, because he treated him as you deserved. And then you can hear God's well done. Friend, that is the gospel. And I want to contend that the gospel is really the only thing that can fix you. It's the only thing that can fix your not enoughness, and the only thing that can save you from the slavery of trying to save yourself. The gospel is a far better answer than self-improvement or self-acceptance, or both of them combined. And I'll just give you a few brief reasons why the gospel is a better answer. The first of those is the gospel is real about your situation. You see, the problem with self-improvement and self-acceptance is that both of them deal with hypotheticals. They don't deal with your current reality. Self-improvement looks at you and says, if you put in a bit of work, if you do this and you do that, then you can become better. You can become a more perfect version of yourself. While self-acceptance looks at you and tells you, yeah, there's all this mess, but just turn off the light. You're perfect. You're good. But neither of them deals with your actual reality. But the gospel, it comes to you and it speaks to you right where you are. It doesn't flatter you. It doesn't tell you you have so much potential, you're so good, you just need to look within yourself. No, it tells you you're a mess. You're a sinner. In fact, you're worse than you even know. But the God of the universe chose to love you. He didn't choose to love the future, better, improved version of yourself. No, he chose to love you. He didn't tell you, oh, you're actually not that bad. You're doing okay. I mean, yeah, everybody messes up a little bit sometimes, but you're fine. No, he chose to love the real and the imperfect you that you currently are. He chose to deal with you in your current situation. And friends, this is a relief. The gospel isn't news of what you have to become and what you need to do, but it's news of what you have received right where you are. There's a verse that summarizes this so beautifully in the Bible in Romans chapter 5, verse 8, where it says, "But God proves his own love for us in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us." Jesus Christ didn't die for who you could become. He didn't die for the actual perfect version of you. But no, he died for sinners. And that is a comfort for us. The gospel is real with your situation, because that's where we all are. But the second reason is the gospel offers you a real solution. Now, think of your position with all the mess in your life like a person who is drowning in an ocean. You're drowning. Your lungs are half submerged with water. And self-improvement comes to you and tells you that you can fix yourself. You can fix your life. Here are some principles. Here are some rules. You just need to follow this and you will get better. It's like the equivalent of going to that person who is drowning in the ocean and shouting out some swimming instructions, telling them, swim with better form, try harder, make sure to breathe. Friend, that is a cruel joke to a person who is drowning. That's not what they need right now. But then self-acceptance is the flip. It comes to that person who is drowning and tells them, friend, drowning is just a mindset. You need to banish that negativity. Repeat after me, I am not drowning. I am not drowning. That doesn't help either. It's also a cruel joke. But what the gospel does is it comes to that person where they are and tells you, this isn't just some way that you can figure out what you're going to do, but it tells you that the God of the universe entered the ocean to pull you to safety. It doesn't tell you to save yourself. It offers you salvation. The gospel is a better answer. The third thing, the gospel is also better because it deals with your guilt. You see, self-improvement tells you, friend, you can't change the past, but what you can do is try to be better today. All you can control is today. Self-acceptance comes to you and tells you again, friend, you can't change the past, but you can accept yourself. But the problem is neither of those deal with the reality that you're still guilty. Nothing's changed. You're still guilty. But the gospel gives you an actual solution to your guilt. It deals with it. It tells you that God has pardoned your guilt. And he didn't do that by simply ignoring it or sweeping it under the rug or saying, that's water off a duck's back, it's fine. But no, it tells you that God pardoned your guilt because he punished it in his son. Your guilt wasn't just expunged from your record, it was paid for in full. Justice has been served so you can move on because that guilt has been dealt with. It gives you an actual solution for your guilt. But then the final reason, the gospel gives you a real hero. Gives you a real hero. It doesn't tell you that you, the broken person, the person who is drowning, need to figure out how to save yourself. It tells you that, unlike David Goggins said, someone did come to help you. Someone has come to save you. And his name is Jesus Christ. His name is Jesus Christ. It tells you that Jesus Christ succeeded everywhere you failed. He was actually perfect. And God accepts you. God tells you, well done. He validates you because of him. Jesus captures this wonderful invitation of the gospel. He says, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." I will give you rest. Rest from the burden of trying to be perfect and to improve yourself. Rest from the burden of having to suppress your guilt and pretend like it's not there. Rest from trying to be the hero of your own story. Actual rest. That is the invitation that Jesus Christ gives to all of us today. So then, in closing, how does the gospel then change how we think about self-improvement? Does it tell us, well, everything's fixed now, so you can just coast and you don't need to improve anything? I don't think that's the case. Like I said, I have no agenda against self-improvement. In fact, I'm actually currently doing one of those viral internet challenges, and it has been helpful. So I have no problem with that. But what the gospel does do is it tells us that we can improve ourselves knowing that we are enough, and we've received the most important validation that we need. We don't improve ourselves to become enough, to fill a void. And that changes everything. We grow from a place of security, not from a place of lack and want. And actually, the gospel gives us a much stronger hope for change, because it tells us that when you put your faith in Jesus Christ, God's Spirit works in you to transform you from the inside out. It's not just you working in all of your own effort now to change yourself. And friend, I know that personally. That's my story. I've spent years in my program of moral self-improvement, trying to better myself and make myself a good person. And you know what? The harder I tried, the more I failed. I can resonate with what Mariam Power said. It was a sad, sad time. It's not good. But actually, when you put your faith in Jesus, when you realize, actually, I am a mess, I do need help, then you get power to change. And then I saw change that I didn't even think was possible, stuff I wasn't even trying to tackle. I didn't think about that. Real change. So the gospel helps us. But how does it change how we think about self-acceptance? Does it tell us that now that God loves us, we can hate ourselves, it's all fine? No, not that either. The gospel does is it gives you a better verdict than your own. It tells you that ultimately what matters is not what other people think about you. It's not what you think about yourself, but it's what the only opinion in the universe that actually matters thinks. And that's the opinion of God. And it tells you that he has said, well done, my child. And that gives you rest for your soul. Because, yes, you will feel guilty. You see, when you've come and you've believed the gospel, I'm sure most Christians here can tell you that they still, at some point, can wrestle with these things. These things aren't things that completely evaporate, but you have an objective verdict that God has approved of you and accepted you. And he did that knowing everything that was wrong with you, even the things that you were most afraid to share. The things that you've told yourself that I will take to the grave with me. I wouldn't even commit it to writing so no one could read it after I'm dead. I will never tell another living soul. God has seen those things, and he's chosen to accept you, to love you. He extends an invitation. So, there's a verse in scripture that always comforts me in this regard. The Apostle John wrote this in a letter to a church. He said, "For whenever our hearts condemn us, God is greater than our heart, and he knows everything." He knows everything. So, ultimately, when we believe the gospel, we're not anxious about dealing with our imperfections. In fact, we know that we will die imperfect. But we also have an eternal hope. We know that one day, just as Jesus rose from the dead, we too will rise. But we'll be perfect this time. And that gives us hope to keep on going. Thank you.